Alright, so today we're working with prime and composite numbers. I think you might have heard of this a little bit. You might not know what they mean exactly, but I think you've heard the terms before. Prime would be those numbers that the only thing that gives you that number is multiplying 1 times that number. Now, a lot of people get confused and think that this is all odd numbers, but that would be wrong. Think about it. Like, what gives me 9? Well, obviously I can multiply 1 times 9. But if there's anything else that can give me 9, then that means it's not a prime number. And obviously 3 times 3 also gives me 9. So therefore, 9 would not be a prime number. 5 would be a prime number because the only thing that's going to give me 5 is if I multiply 1 times 5. But please don't assume that just because it's odd, it has to be prime. Okay, a lot of people make that mistake. But before we get too far into this, let's take a couple of definitions. The first thing we want to talk about is the definition of the word factors. Okay? Factors are 2 or more numbers multiplied together to form a product, which is just a fancy way of saying the two numbers that give you a multiplied number. So for example, some factors of 6 are 1 and 6, and then 2 and 3. So it's just whatever numbers you can multiply together to give you that number. Another one, factors of 20. Well, I got 1 times 20. Then I've got 2 times 10. Then I have 5 times 4. So some numbers have more than other numbers for factors, and that's okay. Not every number has the same number of factors, and that's totally fine. If you're an even number, then you probably have more factors because, you know, if you're even, 2 works for you every time. Whether you're 36 or whether you're 366, 2 is going to work for you. So even numbers are not going to be prime, except there's an exception I'll tell you about in a second. But if you're an even number, so remember, if you end in a 0, 2, 4, 6, or an 8, you cannot be prime because 2 is always going to go into you. So an example of some factors, if I have the number 18, well, what are some factors of 18? Well, obviously I've got 1 times 18, then I've got 2 times 9, and then I've got 3 times 6. All of those things multiplied together would give me 18. So therefore, 18 has 6 factors. All right, what if we look at 36? So what are some numbers that give me 36? Let's start with the easy one. We've obviously got 1 and 36. Okay. Well, another easy one, it ends in a 6, so it's even, so 2 has to work. Well, what times 2 gives me 36, and that would be 18. All right. 3 times 12. 4 times 9. And then 6 times 6. I usually like to go in order just to make sure I don't miss any, but there's really no rhyme or reason. You just go list the ones as you remember them. All right, and so this would be a total of 9 factors. Because we don't use 6. I mean, we use 6 twice, but when we talk about how many factors it has, we don't list it twice. Okay, so it's totally okay that one has 6, one has 9. Some people might only have 2. Some people might have 4. Everybody's not going to have the same number of factors, but factors are those numbers that when you multiply, they give you that number up there. Okay? All right, so let's do some more. Let's talk about prime numbers. Okay? So a prime number, they are whole numbers that have exactly two unique factors they are 1 and the number itself. Alright, so if you weren't sure what unique means, it says the whole numbers that have exactly two unique factors. What unique means is that they have to be different. Alright, it can't be the same number listed twice. Okay, so it just has to be two different ones. Couple quick facts to remember with prime numbers. The number 2 is the only even prime number. So there's no other even number in the number system that's prime except for the number 2. Because think about it, what's the only thing that gives you 2? 2, 1 times 2. Alright, has to be prime. Alright, another quick fact. 0 and 1 are not prime, not composite. Okay, so 0 fall in this category called neither. Okay, it's not going to be prime and they're not going to be composite. They are literally in the neither category. Because think about it. Remember, the definition said it has to be two unique factors, two different factors. Well, one of the things that gives me 0 is 0 times 0. And those are not unique. They're the same number. And then for 1, what gives me 1? Same thing. 1 times 1 is 1. Those are not two unique factors. They're the same factor, so they're not different. But this right here are some quick and easy quiz questions that I usually ask because people always get those things confused. Okay? So 2 is the only even prime number, and then 0 and 1 are the only two numbers that fall into that neither category. Everything else, every other number in the world is either going to be prime or composite, but 0 and 1 are both going to be neither. All right. So now composite numbers. All right, if you're not prime, if you're not neither, then you have to be composite. And composite numbers are numbers greater than 1 with more than 2 factors. Okay, so numbers greater than 1, so first of all you can't start with 1 because 1 is neither. Alright, so anything bigger than 1 and has to have more than 2 factors. Alright, so you're thinking of any number that gives you that number and it's more than just 2 numbers. That sounded confusing, I apologize. But so for example, let's look at a few of them. Alright, so if I give you the number 10, okay, and I'm asking you, is it prime or is it composite? The first thing you need to be thinking of is, what gives me 10? Okay, if you need to list them out, then you can list them out. So for example, what gives me 10? Well, I've got 1 times 10, and I've got 2 times 5. Okay, since it's more than 2 factors, this would have to be composite. But if 1 times 10 was the only thing that gave me 10, then this would be a prime number. Okay? Let's look at another one. Let's do 23. Well, what gives me 23? Well, obviously 1 times 23. But is there anything else in the world, any other numbers, that are going to give me 23? And hopefully you're realizing that that's no. There's nothing else that gives me 23. So 23 is a prime number. So if you can only list those two things for your number, then it has to be prime. Okay? Let's see. 27. Okay? Well, what gives me 27? Well, we'll start easy. 1 times 27. And like I said, a lot of people jump to the conclusion that if it's odd, it has to be prime. But that is not true, because think about it. What else gives me 27? And hopefully you're saying 3 times 9. So since I've got both of those listed, this has to be a composite number. Okay? Let's try another one. 0. Alright, well, what gives me 0? Well, 0 times 0, and then a million other things give me 0. But since they're not two unique factors, this is going to fall into the neither category. Remember, 0 and 1 are the only two that fall into that category of being neither. Alright, one more. 39. Now, I hesitated giving you this one in your notes because this is one that I always put on a quiz or a test, because people once again jump to the conclusion that just because it's odd, it has to be prime. But if you think about it, what gives me 39? Well, I've got 1 times 39. And if you're good with your multiplication, then hopefully you also realize that 3 times 13 also gives me 39. So this has to be a composite number. Another one that people miss a lot is 51. People think 51 is a prime number, but it's not. Okay, so you really just have to be careful and make sure that numbers actually give you what they think. You really have to be good with your multiplication facts. If you need to have your little multiplication chart beside you, that's totally fine. Hopefully the more we practice, the better you'll get at recognizing whether things are prime or composite.